So good afternoon. I'm John Polufchek. I'm a retired Navy Supply Corps officer. I'm also Ernst & Young's government supply chain lead. And first I'd like to thank you all for joining us today in what I hope promises to be a lively discussion around maintenance transformation, challenges and opportunities. Joining me today are Navy and industry leaders of organizations that I would say are on the front lines of maintaining, repairing ships and aircraft, and planning to make transformation efforts a reality. The Navy is poised to significantly modernize its maintenance industrial base, update critical manufacturing infrastructure, and modernize its supply chain. These new capabilities can and will deliver greater productivity and what I believe will be data-driven insights that we haven't had before, such as predictive maintenance, optimal maintenance scheduling, using artificial intelligence, etc. With me today, I have Ms. Lynn Cole, the Vice Commander, Naval Supply Systems Command, Weapons Systems Support. She is the senior civilian charged with supplying the fleet with the parts needed to maintain critical weapon systems, contracting for repair or purchase of items, and managing the transportation and distribution of material. NAVSUP WSS is critical to Navy supply chain performance, managing complex weapon systems support and life cycle management. I have Mr. Tom Labatt, who is currently the Director of Industrial Operations Transformation at the Naval Sea Systems Command. He's responsible for implementation and alignment of a lean value stream transformation system of systems model. This includes a value stream mapping and metrics-based process approach. He has more than 30 years of project management implementing lean transformations. Mr. John Grabenstein, who is currently the Director of Maintenance for Naval Aviation for the Commander Fleet Readiness Centers. In this position, he oversees all maintenance planning activity and supports naval aviation acquisition and in-service decision makers to optimize their maintenance program for the naval aviation enterprise, aircraft, weapons, and other systems. He has more than 30 years of combined military and civilian service. I also have Mr. Paul Smith, who leads BAE Systems ship repair business as Vice President and General Manager. He's responsible for the strategic, operational, financial, and business performance of the company's full-service shipyards in the United States. Paul leads roughly 3,000 highly skilled employees located in 3 U.S. Navy fleet concentration areas: Mayport, Norfolk, and San Diego. His BAE team and thousands of subcontractors provide maintenance, repair, and modernization of U.S. Navy surface ships. I also have Mr. Mike Cadenazzi, a Navy veteran and an executive director in EY's core business service markets team supporting the aerospace and defense consulting service line. Mike has 25 years of experience in defense and aerospace and government addressing strategic and operational challenges. He focuses on growth strategy, mergers and acquisitions, supply chain, technology investments, and operational improvements. So for today, for this discussion, we really have 3 themes: Navy transforming and modernizing industrial base, challenges and opportunities; the role of digital and emerging technologies to realize transformation objectives. How I say it is, how does Industry 4.0 fit into this? And the urgency. Is there an urgency and need to accelerate modernization efforts? And for those that have sat through a few sessions at Sea, Air, and Space, there is no doubt that we're focused on great power competition. And it's like every day we wake up and the world gets more complex. Everybody is concerned that conflict could happen in the years to come. CNO probably said it best the other day. 70% of the fleet that we have today, aircraft, ships, submarines, we will have in the next decades to follow. We must maintain and repair them at a fast rate. I think that people have seen and understood a sense of urgency with the People's Republic of China and South China Sea. I kind of sum this up with what I've heard one leader say: we're not going to necessarily build our way to victory. We're going to have to repair our way to victory. And I think that senior leader was talking about having to get every pointy-nose aircraft, every ship, every submarine that we can underway and into the fight. And I think this panel here today is set up to talk about how the Navy and industry is going to go do that. So I think the microphone for questions is over there. I'm going to remind the panel members to keep their answers to about 3 minutes because we have lots of material to cover. I'm not going to necessarily hold questions to the end. I'm going to cover hopefully 2 themes, allow you to ask questions, come back to the final theme, and give another round of questions to the panel, and then maybe get to some questions at the end. I've been told I have this room to 1800. Kidding. So let's get started. Paul, you operate several shipyards in the United States that repair Navy surface ships. What are some of the challenges in the current maintenance repair process? Can you give me a perspective on this?
Sure, thanks. A couple perspectives, one industry-wide, and then I'll go into one specific for BAE Systems. But first thing is around unpredictability. So as the ship comes in, what's the amount of work that has to take place on it? There's a lot of discovery, growth, and new work that takes place. Where we're operating under a fixed price contract, we're hoping for fixed scope. But there's a good deal of options that come into play as you go through that discovery process. So it's hard to be predictable, which manifests itself in a number of areas. Do you have the right number of people? Are they the right job discipline, machinists, welders, pipe fitters, and so forth? So that's one of the pieces. Second, which is good, there's been improvement of awarding the ships at A-120, which is 4 months before the start of the avail. But if you can imagine, you're awarded somewhere between $50 and $300 million of work, or upwards of 3 million hours. And at 4 months and 1 day, you don't know if you're going to get that work or not. And in many cases, if you come in second place, you get no work. And so really that gas and brake of how many people do you need, and should you be adding or subtracting people, and the unpredictability that goes with that is a big item. Another challenge is we're the LMA, we're the lead maintenance authority, but on these avails, somewhere between 30 and 70 different government suppliers called AITs are on there. So for all of you that have been aboard a combat vessel, coordinating that many number of people within the tight confines of a ship, it becomes very difficult as well, and then you got to get the sequence of work right. You can't do certain tasks before or after other tasks. And also safety comes into a big play as well. Fire safety, all the things that go into to that is a big one as well. And then the actual state of the ship when it comes in. So you may know some things by working on a ship of the same class, but each of the ships are different. One of the analogies is kind of like your kids. They may have the same parents, but each kid's got a completely different personality. So same thing, if you're working on one DDG, it's going to have a different set of situations as another one. And then the last piece, one of the challenges BAE's got is our infrastructure. So we have the most infrastructure, we have the most piers, the most docks, and so we have a hard time making sure those piers and docks are full. There's a number of times the dock is empty or the pier's empty, and the problem with that is that cost rolls to the next avail, and you're in a competitive environment, so if you lose one or two in a row, the cost of that's got to roll to the next one. And so making sure we use our assets is another big challenge for us.
Thanks, Paul. So Tom, Paul went through a few challenges. You're leading a transformation effort at NAVC. Can you talk about those, your biggest pieces and what you're trying to solve and work on?
Yes, and
You have some slides.
I need to stand up for this. So I was asked the same question about 2 years ago. I was working for NavAir for the last 30 years, and I came into NAVC 2 years ago, and they said really the same question. I said, well, this is a complex system. So I have some slides, because for me to just talk to it, you folks are probably going to go, I have no idea what you just said. Or you'd have a different picture in your head than what I'm speaking to. So I want to share. Complexity. You got to understand the complexity that you're trying to fix, meaning what are the locations? What is the system that you're trying to improve? You look here and you got 4 different shipyards. I got 30 minutes, right?
You have 3.
Okay. So you have 4 different shipyards. You have multiple different classes of ships. Within the different classes of ships, you have multiple blocks. There's a lot of different activities that are happening. And even the shipyards, you have some that are fixing both submarines and aircraft carriers. You have some that are just doing submarines. So how do you do transformation across all 4 shipyards? Well, you got to understand the system. And the system that I built here is really looking at the top left is that supportability analysis. We're not talking about modes of operation. We're talking about how are you supporting these systems? What's the RCM analysis that's being performed, the LoRa, the maintenance task analysis? What is all the data that goes into you being able to support that system in the fleet? So on the top left, you get down to the in-service support. That's your maintenance plan. That maintenance plan is saying, okay, now I have all the data for that class of ship. Now, what's the O-level maintenance that's going to be done? What's the I-level maintenance that's going to be done? And what's the depot-level maintenance that's going to be done? So that's your trigger for getting the parts going to NAVSUP. You got to have that supportability analysis done, because that tells you the parts that you need. If you don't do that, then we go to NAVSUP, and NAVSUP says, well, we don't have the parts. And then they're like blaming NAVSUP. It's not NAVSUP's fault. So you got to understand the system. Then you come up here and you say, well, in the depot, well, you got the financial piece. You got to fund the system. Then you get down below and you look at the 4 lines going across. Those are the 4 different shipyards. You got Norfolk, you got Puget, you got Portsmouth, and you have Pearl. Then you have shipyard operations, which is non-availability specific. That's your SIOP program. You have advanced availability planning, availability execution, and then you have your shops down below. So all these have to be measured. And once you measure them, then you do the gap analysis, then you understand where the improvements need to go. So my last slide, which is only going to be 20 more minutes, is you look at the shipyard itself, and it comes down to define the system. What is the system that you're operating in? Then you come across to measure the system. So you got to measure it. What's your goal, where you're at, and what's your gap? And then that's going to produce your tactical shipyard improvements or your systemic shipyard improvements. And what do I mean by that is you're going to have problems in the shipyard where they're going to fix it one time, and if they don't fix the systemic issue that created that problem, then that next class of ship that comes in is going to experience the same problem. So you have to fix it, that 30-day fix, and then you got to find that 30-year fix so that you're fixing the system. And sometimes that means you got to go outside of the shipyard into the external stakeholders to find that solution. I think I'm at 3 minutes, so I'll stop there.
Thanks, Tom.
You bet.
So, Lynn, Tom just mentioned NAVSUP, and I know NAVSUP is working on a lot of things. People have talked about lack of material availability. I've read about growing cannibalizations across the fleet. I know NAVSUP is working on things. Can you kind of give us a picture of what's going on in your walls?
I certainly can, and I think, Tom, that's the first time I've ever heard anyone from NAVC say, the part's not there, or it's not NAVSUP's fault.
I'm here for you, ma'am.
But, I am here representing the supply chain for the Navy, and we operate some of the most complex supply chains that are out there, 2.5 million different distinct parts across all the ships and aviation platforms. So there's a lot of stuff, and all of that stuff is not predictable or forecastable. We don't know exactly when it's going to break. So, and the challenge that we face as a supply chain is that it's been siloed, it's been uncoordinated, and it lacked alignment for decades. There were a lot of shadow supply systems created. There's lots of confusion about how do we get things. There were lots of cutbacks and roles changing over time. So I think we lost some of the basics for supply chain. One example of this, people making siloed, unintentional decisions affected my partner here with the FRCs. Over time, we have measured that the FRCs always have played a very critical role in repair of our material. Over the previous 10 years, the volume of work that we were able to put through an FRC was down by 70%. That was not intentional. It happened. People made decisions, and the outcome was this reduction. So we have to be very careful, and we have re-strategized, and we have stood up NAVSUP as the end-to-end supply chain manager under a framework called NSS Supply, where we are getting after all the initiatives where we're looking end-to-end now, not within the silos, not within just a piece of the supply chain, but across the entire thing. How do we fix everything from the industrial base to the organic repair base to the demand management signals to the turnaround times? We've incorporated all of that, and NAVSUP has been named the end-to-end supply chain coordinator. We thank leadership of the Navy for really supporting that position and allowing us to take that more holistic look.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Lynn. Because I know there's a lot going on in NAVSUP. Mike, you have a broad industry perspective across the aerospace and defense sector. What are you seeing in industry today that could act as best practices to accelerate transformation of our repair capabilities?
Get real, get better. That's a joke, right? But it's also exactly what we should be doing, and that's what the industry does every day, which is sort of face the reality of how's the business going, and then pivot, do something different, come up with a new product. I'm brought to this because as I think back to the ProPublica piece about the collision of the Fitzgerald in the Pacific, and there was a sailor that hit a button 1,000 times an hour to refresh the radar screen. That's get real. He lives in reality every day. The one thing he can't do is get better. He can't fix that. This is the room where those things get fixed. And so sending the sailors to sea with that kind of problem is just unacceptable. It should be at every level of the chain of command. Where are the best practices for that? Leadership. Go back to Ensign 101, LPO 101, leadership. How do you go ahead and get out of the Pentagon and get to the waterfront with a lawyer, a contracts officer, talk to the CEO of a company and figure out how to change it, right? That's what companies do every day. They walk the line, they talk to their suppliers, they make changes, they look at a problem, they work it till the solution gets there. And I think there's this disconnect between the strategy by exhortation of we're going to get better to the reality at the front of a guy like Paul is at the end of a lot of decisions and then has to deal with the consequences of late parts or budgets that aren't right. If I go back and I look at sort of Navy budgets for maintenance as you benchmark the sort of top Navy, sort of maintenance lines in the O&M account in 2000, it's about 42% of the Navy shipbuilding budget. If you look at the same budget lines in 2023, 2024, it's about 40% of the shipbuilding budget. Now, there's some other money tucked away in other places, but there's always been that. There's other lines in procurement. So structurally, have we gone ahead and changed what we need to do in terms of money and financing to the challenges that this sort of situation represents? Those are the things that are bringing the nearest best practices for, current industry, in the way that we're doing things in the field. Additive manufacturing. What percentage of the ship is additive now? What percentage of a capability is additive? Sure, not everything can be, but something can be. Right, so figuring it out and having that number handy means just going down and sort of talking and saying, why can't this be made with additive? We've all had discussions where somebody along the chain of command said, nope, we're just not going to go ahead and do that. Well, why? If it saves time and money, does the business case work out? What about digital twins? We're all going to have digital twins. We will all have digital twins for everything. What's holding you back? John and I had a great discussion with a customer firm that actually has an amazing digital twin capability, and the Navy's like, nah, we're going to go ahead and do an SBIR and some other stuff. In 2025, they're going to come back to us with a solution, and the guy's got a digital twin that works today. And so your question is, like, from a leadership standpoint, are you facing the reality of like what you can do now and actually have impact in terms of how we're operating, the problems that the yards represent, the problems that the ships have? And none of that's easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's cheap. I'm just saying that that's where leadership comes in and what's going to set this apart from sort of past efforts to go ahead and change the way we're operating.
Thanks, Mike. So I think you get the sense that there's a lot going on across the Navy to get after some of these challenges and opportunities. I'm going to go to kind of our second theme of digital and emerging technology. John, naval aviation, in my eyes, has been in the forefront of doing some transformational things within the NAE and making things better. What are some of the major components of the FRC's transformation plan, and do you have a role or fit for new emerging technologies and digital things in what you're doing?
All right, thank you. So, we, in order to go over a little bit of the transformation plan, I got to give a little bit of history. So how many people in here remember the Rhino Recovery Aircraft 341 for the Super Hornets? Most people in here have heard about that. So the FRC played a huge part in that. So the outer reporting times for our depot level events for the Super Hornets were over 120 days. So as Ms. Cole mentioned, the NSS supply, the aviation side started the Naval Sustainment System Aviation. So looking at the NSSA tenants, we were able to focus on the root cause of what's holding our aircraft out in the depot for an excessive amount of time, apply principles to those aircraft lines, and we were able to get our turnaround times down from 120 days down to 60 for the Super Hornets. We started applying the same tenets across multiple other TMS. For example, E2D went from 350 days down to 211, and our H60s went from 165 days down to 120. So that was in the 2018 timeframe. Around the 2021 timeframe, as Ms. Cole mentioned earlier, we started to do analysis on our components and started realizing that we lost about 40% of our component volume that we had in 2011 was not present in the FRC depots in 2021. As you looked at that, our workforce stayed pretty much stable, but our labor rates increased and our production times increased. So we looked at this and we said, we have a serious issue on our hands. So we started to apply the NSSA principles to the component side of the depot. The reason we chose components, for those that are unfamiliar with the FRCs, we have aircraft, then we have engines, we have components, and then we have modules that feed into our engines. We also have engineering and logistics services, but this discussion is based on the MRO side. So we're about a $2.7 billion a year business, and the components is the largest portion of that business. So we decided, in order to start transforming the depots, we had to go after three key priorities. The first was to arrest the decline in our components. The second one is, once we arrest that decline in our components, we had to then wire our FRCs for performance to make sure that we are sticking to our budgeted, if not better, labor and material costs. And then lastly, we had to go after strategically targeting new volume, not just for the work that's out there today, but that next fifth generation aircraft and components. So in order to attack this, we stood up 7 pillars. I won't talk through all 7 of them, but they range from roles and responsibilities to labor efficiency, volume capture, material cost availability, which is a fancy term for supply, infrastructure, and then the last 2 were digital and data analytics. So to the technology question, we used the data that was all of our systems that we had. We started building dashboards. We started looking at all the data that was from all the different sites and started running them through a rigorous analytic process where we started finding out key areas where we had to improve. We assigned the digital pillar to make sure we had one single source of truth, so that way all of our data coming in and going out is equal across all the enterprise. The data pillar has also enabled us to make sure that we are aligning to the other commands such as NAVSUP, DLA, within our internal organization, and then also up to our Echelon 2 NAVAIR to make sure that we're tying to the NAVAIR and the NE KPIs, affordability, availability, and capability. And then the last thing was that for the data, we set up a stringent metrics configuration control board, which is a single voting board to ensure that we have data accuracy. The second part of that is digital transformation. So the digital transformation is used to ensure that we have a truly connected workforce and that all the data that's available is transparent and available to all of our commands. We are working towards, we're not there yet, but working towards a single MRO system to then be able to have all of our data in a single system Just as a side note, when we looked at when we're doing our transformation plan, we have about 20-some disparate IT systems that we need to feed together to the naval reports and generate statistics for our business. So that's the long-term transformation key enabler is that one-shop performance IT system. Then at the lower level, we're also implementing digital changes to increase our productivity, such as electronic work packages, electronic work orders, electronic work instructions. And lastly, we're looking at implementing digital toolboxes across all our FRCs, which will enable the artisans to perform their maintenance more efficient.
Thanks, John. Paul, as an industry rep, what is BAE's vision for a shipyard of the future?
Yeah, so best example for us is our announcement back on December 1st down in Jacksonville. So Jacksonville is a shipyard we've been in for a long time. And on December 1st, we were happy to announce, in partnership with Pearlson, putting a ship lift down there. So what does that mean? We had an old floating dry dock that was built in 1944. We needed to replace it. Pearlson's the preeminent leader in a ship lift. Worldwide, they've built over 260, even about 17 of them larger than the one they're building for us. But what it allows you to do is to get the ship out of the water in about an hour and a half, put it up to a land level facility, have it in a cradle so you can move it. So in the past, if you had a DDG in the dry dock, you were one and done. You had to pretty much work on that DDG until it was done to get it off dock, and now you can park, if we wanted to, 3 DDGs on a land level facility. Our intention is to use it not only with Navy work, but commercial work, Coast Guard, and anybody else that needs a little bit of help. But for us, this is a big item. It addresses the cost around infrastructure, since the cost to maintain it is less. It's a proven technology, and where we're positioned in Jacksonville, the geology and the geography of it allows us to put it there as well. So it's a number of factors that came together along with the help of the state of Florida for us to make a $200 million investment and address the situation and go about it differently than just directly replacing a floating dry dock like we would have in the past. So for me, that's an example of partnership with the Navy, the state, suppliers that are out there to use a proven technology and put that in place.
Thanks. So, Tom, you're running a transformation effort for NAVSEA. What are some of your obstacles in this new and emerging technology, and what are you doing to jumpstart transformation and get around those obstacles?
Yeah, biggest obstacle, that's easy. We can't get parts from NAVSUP. No. I'm just kidding. I already covered that part. It really comes down to, in my opinion, it's the mechanic at the lowest level. It's the culture, it's the empowerment, and it's the investing in the people. If we don't do that, it's not going to matter what we do at the headquarters or what we're doing at the higher level. You've got to empower them and help them understand the value of the work that they do. And part of that is also setting up structurally. The way we're currently set up is we have one supervisor to 15 mechanics. So where is the accountability? Where is the help when that mechanic needs help? Well, the supervisor's back working admin, putting in time cards. So the mechanic doesn't have that help. It's very difficult for them to get that help. So Toyota Production System has 4 associates or team members. Then they have one team lead across them. And that team lead is there just to say, what's your problem? How can I help? So how do we take that model, put it into the shipyards, and say, well, okay, now we take somebody who is now trained as an expert mechanic, and you say, now your job is, as an expert, you're overlooking the work of these 4 mechanics. And when they need help, that's your job, is you come there, you say, what's your problem, how do you help? Because they're working standard work. And if they're working standardized work, and they know they can do it better, then empower them to make those changes. Empower them to say, I've been doing this for 20 years, I can make this standard work better. So they make the standard work, and then make that part of the standard work. So if we get the workforce to start doing those quick Kaizen events, and I know NAVAIR, NAVSEA, when we say Kaizen, we're talking about a 3-week event. I'm talking about instant. You're talking very quick Kaizen events. and you get them to improve their standardized work, document it, and then you move on, that's going to bring up what are those nuggets that you have to fix that are more systemic and bigger. So just getting that into the shipyards, getting more of that mindset and empowering the workforce, I think is going to make a huge transition to actually making some transformational efforts.
So, Lynn, Tom set the record straight and said NAFSUP is the root of all problems.
Sorry.
I'm going to give you this next question, but I know that's not the case. But what is NAFSUP doing in the emerging technology and digital realm to get after some of these modernization efforts?
Okay, we really, across the shipyards, are taking a very close look at, first, before we get to anything digital, transforming and making sure that we understand the processes, the functions, and the flow of the data and the material as it moves through the supply chain. So we are identifying those, I talked about before, siloed decision makers, having them understand that identification of the material requirements is very important. So integrating whatever digital MRO system emerges for the shipyards with the supply chain, sending the signals at the right point in time is going to be essential. Then we also know that we have to keep track of all this material, we have to locate it, so we'll be looking into the future into all the digital warehousing, the digital storage, the digital tracking of material, but we're nowhere close to achieving that in the navies now. So we have basically broke it down into a near, mid, and longer term type problem. In the near term, 23, 24, we're going to optimize and standardize the shipyards with the Code 500 Supply Support Unit. It's going to be a franchise model. Everybody is going to work with the same processes. We're going to pressurize the supply chain as it is to accelerate material deliveries, and we're going to figure out the system behind doing that. In the midterm, that's 24 and 25, we're going to integrate material-related processes across all the shipyard codes. So while we could fix the supply departments, unless the planners, unless the engineers, unless the projects start thinking a little bit differently about how they interact with the supply chain, we're not going to be able to fix anything. So there's a level of really, I can't stress enough, cultural change at the shipyards that we're going to have to go to make sure that people really understand that supply will be there for them given the correct signals. And then in the longer term, which would be 26 and beyond, we're working a big material strategy. This is involved with PEO, SSN. Admiral Rucker has been out there pounding the grounds, trying to get us the funding from Congress that will allow us to actually do material buys ahead of time. So while we're fixing the near and midterm, we're probably not going to see more material because it's a lead time away. But we're also getting the funding, getting the ordering, figuring out the Virginia-class material strategy so that we can go and start buying in those ship sets of Virginia-class material that we'll need for overhauls. That's where we're going to need industry involvement with us, because while we are trying to overhaul these ships and repair all these components and replace all these components, there's not enough depth on the shelf right now to support that. We're going to go give that signal to industry. We're going to buy all that stuff in, but it's going to be competing at the same time with the new production supplier base that's out there. So we as a Navy want to make sure we have our signals straight to industry, that you understand that we need both. So we are going to need an industrial base that will support both of those signals. So we really need that genuine partnership so that you understand the full demand signal that's coming into industry from the supply chain, not only the new production acquisition, but the sustainment piece that's there also.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. Mike, I'm going to give you the last question in this digital section of the theme, and then open up to take a few questions from the audience. I think the microphone's over there, so if you wanted to stand up and ask a question, you can queue now. So Mike, how can industry and government best collaborate to tackle these issues and achieve modernization and transformation goals?
I think it's probably trite to say that industry should help the government go fast, but it should, right? I mean, so while every company is certainly a wellspring of patriotism and service, not all of them are a gold mine of value, and if you're not getting fast out of that company, they need to go away. I think that's a challenge that we have today, is that there's a lot of essentially detritus hanging around that's just feeding at the trough. Stop it. Just make it stop. Admiral Ferguson started this back with the Night Court and the Navy staff back in, I think, 2011. Army Secretary Esper, then Defense Secretary Esper, repeated that process with Night Court at the Army and then the service level, basically going through, and it takes effort to go ahead and end things and repurpose that money towards something that's more valuable. That should be having top to bottom. That frees up resources not to fire people, not to end stuff, but to do the things that are more valuable, like digital. When you talk about digital and what you can enable for the future, just invest in best practices that come from industry. I mean, all these companies that are here are dying to give you free stuff. Everybody. Call EY. We'll give you free stuff all day. I guarantee it. We'll take your data. We'll crunch numbers for you. We'll come back with 100 pages of analysis saying, this is what you can do with your data. These are all the problems that you have. These are all the solutions. All these things are available now. Don't dawdle on market studies. There's a million solutions. Everything is being done by somebody better than the Navy's doing it now, except in like submarines, right? Sonar. Okay, got it. But everything else, building stuff, making things, running things, everything's being done and managed at scales that the Navy can't keep up with today. And I think you got to take advantage of that, just accept the fact that there's a solution. None of those solutions will solve all of your problems. None of them. They'll do 40, 50, 60% of your solution. Then you're going to have to figure out what else you need to do that. Is it around services? Is it around another tool? Is it around actually spending some time doing analysis and closing the gap? But dawdling over which solution is the best tends to not be the best solution for the government when you know it's not going to solve the entire thing no matter what. Don't build anything. Like, building solutions bespoke is just the worst possible solution. I get it, Kessel runs amazing, Defense Digital Service is amazing. Okay, if you're getting those guys working on your stuff, fantastic for you. But in general, you should be buying solutions that are COTS, that have a tail, right? That'll support you with a growth path, a vendor that actually wants and is invested in your success and delivering capability. Those are all incredibly important things for the future to understand how to maximize the value of all these capabilities which are having impact at scale. We're doing $100 million transformations of Smart Factory at commercial enterprises every single week. We've got demonstration facilities, and like getting defense customers to come in and invest in that is very difficult. They don't understand it. I think the budgets are different. But understanding that cycle end to end of like, this is where all of this is heading. This is the business case for this. We can make it work for you. Yeah, the numbers may not close this quarter, but they'll close over 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. They'll close over the FIDIP. And that's the important thing to understand, is that there's a way to close these business cases. If you don't understand the business case, it's hard sometimes to do that, then bring in somebody who can. Talk to the finance people, the comptroller folks, have them crunch the numbers and explain what the ROI is on these investments. The ROI is there, or industry wouldn't be doing it.
Seeing nobody at the microphone, or at least brave enough to ask a question. Do I have a question? I was going to stop. I think I see somebody coming up.
Thank you so much for the wonderful session. My name is Sonia Miller. I am a part of Source America for the Building One program. And I know you touched on some of the challenges in the repair process. One of them having the right number of people. And I was just curious if they already focus on employing people with disabilities.
Right, so Ability One, disadvantaged folks, et cetera. I'm going to ask in this order, Tom, John, and then maybe Paul. Lynn, I'm going to skip you because I know you have an Ability One relationship, because I may ask for that rounded out answer. But Tom.
Yeah, so we do have, in the recruiting aspect, we do look at individuals targeted with disabilities, how we can fit them in the organization. And I think that's not only within the shipyards, that's across all the Navy, headquarters as well. There are opportunities, like when I go to fill a position, I can look at the certain database to find out the skill sets that are there to see if they fit the roles and responsibilities that I'm looking for. So there's absolutely an active approach of making sure we're including that community and creating the opportunities for them.
John, from a NAVAIR perspective?
Yes, I'll just second what Tom said. So NAVAIR wide, we have a bunch of programs out there that are looking to hire with the targeted audience that you mentioned. Individually at each one of our FRCs, so we have so there's 9 FRC components, and then a 10th one is the headquarters, and each one of them has individual programs that they would work with the local communities in addition to the NAVAIR wide programs that are available.
Yeah. Paul, from a commercial shipyard perspective?
Yeah, so for BAE Systems, definitely a cornerstone for our corporation is to be diverse, inclusive, and safe. Really going out there to try to leverage all the people that are out there. And as a corporation, we do that every day and have been recognized for that. It's a great company to work for, and I know the others in industry that are my neighbors, competitors, do the same thing as well.
Yeah. Lynn, I'm going to give you the closing here because I know NavSub's got an Ability One relationship.
Right. We do have an Ability One contract in place where with every hire we do, we look for the skill sets and we match it to our existing contract, and we have a vehicle that can very quickly get us to that type of workforce and put it in place.
Thank you so much.
Brad Hicks, I'm retired admiral. I was CO6, program executive, and in industry for about 9 years, and I had the warfare centers, and I was the safety certification authority. To your comment earlier about innovation, I agree, we can always use innovation, but I call it the self-licking ice cream cone. Processes are great, innovation's great, but when you say somebody can bring you a new toy, software, digital, whatever, you still got to certify. And so a lot of times people get liquored up in the building over a good idea because it's going to make you more efficient, quicker, leaner, faster. And a lot of times that's true to a point until you have to certify complex weapons, which you all keep alluding to, the complexity of what we do. Safety on a Navy ship, because we fire ordnance, is 10 to the -6 probability of occurrence. That's the standard. We can't screw up because they're steel ships with an ungrounded 3-phase electrical system with a 550,000 gallons with average age of say 20 years old. So one of the things I really want the Navy, comment, which I'm excited about some of the stuff I heard, is caution that processes and software and innovation is great, but if it's not count, which requires two-way communication, then you have a chance to fail. The other comment Ms. Cole made, and maybe I misunderstood, so maybe it's a clarification. When you said you can't predict the parts you need on the shelf, I strongly disagree. The fleet burns through parts. If we don't have a database that can show us what we need on the shelves with some predictive, so we can order ahead of need, so we have that, so we won't have to wait or go to the OEM for everything, then we're worse off than I think. So I hope I misunderstood what you said there.
I got it. So you essentially got two questions, is safety, and you got to be kidding me, we don't have demand. So Tom, I'm going to give you the one opportunity to talk about certification and safety, and you're running a big transformation, and I know you're thinking about that. And then Lynn, if you could just give a quick answer to the demand piece.
Thanks. Excellent questions. First of all, so I have innovation labs that are across all 4 shipyards, and a big part of what I do is I don't want that new great idea to come to me for us to try to fit into our processes or to fit into our ships. I want to measure the system and identify that gap, and then let's find the solution for that gap, so we're not force-fitting something. But when it comes to certifying it, we work very closely. Like I'm in CO4. We work very closely with the CO5 group, which is the engineering, and you got the safety folks that are absolutely. You got to look at the system holistically, and you got to make sure that you're taking into account all of those aspects, and you're not just saying, all right, this is the system, this is the solution. Now let's go put it out there on the boat. So It's a team effort going across all the functional areas of NAVC to make sure we take into account those areas. Excellent question, and it's certainly something that I'm not a strong advocate of, here's the new whiz-bang thing we got to go do, and then try to force fit it in. Sometimes that works, and sometimes there might be a good idea, but I'd rather measure the system, identify the gap, and what is that whiz-bang thing capability that we need to fill that gap, and then go through the proper procedures and make sure it's safe.
Lynn, I know we have a database, but I'm going to let you answer the question.
No, it all goes hand in hand with statistical forecastability and the investment strategy that the Navy uses. We can only buy parts that we can get bought out of the wholesale system if it's going to sell within 2 years and remain solvent. So we know we have some safety items that we have to keep on the shelf. We know we have some insurance items, but there are other items that break, but they only break once every 5 years. We're not going to keep one on the shelf. We're going to order it when that failure occurs. So we do take advantage of readiness-based sparing. We understand the forecastable items, but we've been reduced to a very transactional type repair or spare process because of that 2-year funding cyclic constraint. So if we were left unconstrained, sure, we'd be able to say, yes, industry, we're going to need one in the next 10 years, and go ahead and buy it. But we're not, that's the reality. So the systems are set up to treat the unforecastable as an order on demand.
Can I just add to that real quick?
Sure.
So 2 things that come to mind. In the Navy, we're our own worst enemy. In both the Navy and, from the ship side and the air side. When we are out there and we're taking parts or I've got to put a bunch of those in my desk drawer because they're going to be limited supply, and we pull them out when we need them, that's not hitting the demand. So NAVSUP has no idea, DLA has no idea that demand is even there. And then on top of that is when we don't do the supportability analysis and we don't understand that product support package to support the system, and one of those elements is supply, meaning parts, and we don't do that, they're not going to know. So it's sometimes we're our own worst enemies, and we're setting NAVSUP up just to be blamed for something, and we got to fix that system.
I think I have one more question here. Sure, you have a question, and then I'm going to move to the other, to some final questions for the panel.
Well, thank you for listening to my last question here. My name is Ryan Mulcahy. I work for Dell Technologies. So across the Navy, we're seeing initiatives in digital transformation, zero trust, cloud, HPC, cyber resiliency. Within these larger Navy-like initiatives, where would you say the shipyard's efforts are mainly focused right now? And how do you see the vendors best supporting these long-term efforts?
So, Tom, I'm going to go to you, and then Paul, maybe from a commercial industry perspective.
Did you just get that off of GPT chat?
No comment.
Okay, there was a lot there. Summarize real quick, what do you want?
Yeah, so I'm just curious how we can best support the shipyards in their efforts to digitally transform from the vendor's perspective. Obviously, the Navy's putting a lot of workloads on you guys to move to the cloud, to...
Okay.
Yeah, so remember, he's Dell,
Correct.
right? So Dell, right, I mean, the Navy has invested in flank speed. There's been a lot of digital movement to cloud. How are you using that in the shipyard?
Yeah, so I've got something. Back to the slide. Oh. Yeah. I'm going to take up the remaining time right here. So think about a ship. So when a ship comes into availability execution, which is here, there's about 2 years of planning that happens here. And the problem is we get an initial AWP from the class maintenance plan that says, here's what you got to go perform. Then we may go out and we do an assessment of that ship. But that's all the supportability data or the health of that ship that we get. What I would like to see is you have a database of maintenance from the O level, database of maintenance from the I level. You've got the class maintenance plan, what's the health of that from the supportability analysis. So you got all this data. You've got the depot level maintenance of previous class of ships that came through. So this is all siloed data. If we want to really understand the material health of that ship before it comes in, and we can plan it for the advanced availability planning and integrate it into that, then we're going to have less growth of work in the availability execution, because we're going to understand the ship condition of that ship better. So if we can use machine learning, AI, to tie databases and understand the material health of that ship, and when I say material, it's not the IAL, it's IEL, is really the material health of that ship, we can plan better, then we can execute better. Does that help?
That is helpful, thank you.
Okay.
So, while you're finding your seat, John, the NAE NavAir has been working on transformation for a period of time already. How are you partnering with other organizations inside DoD, inside the Navy, and with industry to accelerate transformation for naval aviation?
All right, thank you. So, first of all, I'll kind of go back to my previous comments about the data analytics. So we're absolutely partnering with agencies outside of the FRC enterprise. For example, DLA, NAVSUP, we're partnering with DAS and Sustainment. We're even reaching out to our counterparts in the Air Force at the ALCs. The way that we're facilitating these discussions and these partnerships and collaboration is through the use of data. So we really took a deep dive into what metrics matter. So one example is when we used to talk to NAVSUP, NAVSUP would talk induction to plan. I have a schedule, I need you to induct these components on these schedules. The FRCs talked production to plan. So we got together and collaborated with the DLA and NAVSUP, and we came up with a new metric, on-time delivery. So we're using that, we're using the data, we're using the dashboards we built to drive the conversations with the partnerships. At the tactical level, we've, in our transformation plan, we've extended the offer to, at the GS-15 06 level, we actually have DLA and NAVSUP employees as part of our transformation plan, leading efforts within our pillars, where they're performing the root cause analysis, they're coming up with ways to implement new initiatives, and then after we implement them, overseeing execution. At a more strategic level, the ComFRC, NAVSUP, and DLA stood up an SCS flag level triad that meets once a month to break down barriers. Partnering, like I said, mentioned DAS and Sustainment, they're part of the component repair working group, where they look at all the TMS critical items lists and come up with the most critical parts that the depots have to look to stand up capability and capacity. And then lastly, we understand that the industry partners are key to the entire industrial defense base. So our data is showing that our components that we have public-private partnerships with are our best performing shops. And so we're really reaching out to industry to better partner and do collaboration with through the use of CSAs for public-private partnerships. And then one thing that we did to make that relationship better is we stood an industry best practice of a centralized coordination office, where we're now looking at all of our workload over the next execution year up to 15 years, and we're looking at it as an enterprise view, and we have one single office for everybody to come, fleet customers, PMAs, PEOs, and industry, so we have one voice of the customer at a central location.
Paul, to an industry perspective here, I know BAE is working on transformation items. How does new technology, and specifically anything digital, play into what you're doing? You've talked about the new ship lift, but anything digital?
Yeah, so a big one for us, if you think about the problem set, so you got a schedule with 25,000+ line items. You got 73 other companies working on the ship, not under your direction, in addition to your own suppliers. You have to conduct that work between 12 and 18 months. And so for us, as we go about repairing the ship, we'll get between 750 or 1,500 changes, RCCs. And so if you can imagine, you build this 30,000 line item schedule, and then you drop in all these changes, you have to rerun that schedule again. And so if you think about that many permutations, then there's a lot of guardrails out there, right? You can't do painting and hot work in the same space. You can only fit so many people in the same space. Things have to be sequential. The guys get sick of me saying it, but you can't put your socks on after you put your shoes on. So you got to get the sequence right. You got to consider safety and a number of other factors. but there's a ton of unpredictability and a lot of flexibility required. So can you run those permutations continuously? So earlier, which I thought was funny, you made the joke about AI, and I'm dying to ask it, can you create a 30,000 line item schedule for an LHD over 18 months with 1,500 changes and 73 other suppliers, and with some work specs that are less than clear? So that's what we have to go through. So I think that automation and being able to go through what you rely on people's experience for, but much faster, and more permutations, and then coupled with the other piece around data. So how did you actually perform on a similar chip in the past or a similar work item in the past? You may have estimated A, but you performed B. And so if you pulled that data in at the same time and were able to run all of that and get the most effective permutation around resources, cost, schedule, that's the way to go. And I think that would help to address the fundamental issue here, which is all that unpredictability and change as you get into the ship.
Yeah, Tom, I'm just going to flip that question right to you. Is there a digital plan for the shipyards?
Yeah, so we do have a digital plan. So Admiral Brown, who is CO4, and then Admiral Richmond, who is CO3, they jointly look at a digital plan for the shipyards. CO4T, myself, for transformation, the piece that I own for that is really, I want to get to the fundamentals. I want to understand, how do we measure the shipyards? Because until we can understand how to measure the shipyards at all levels, you have a driver tree at the shipyard level, but then you got to break it down to the advanced availability planning, availability execution, the shops, and understand how we can measure those in the data systems and then identify the gaps. We're not going to be able to do the improvements that we need to do. So there is digital initiatives that are being worked across different aspects of the shipyards. But my shop, my area is really, let's drive transformation, but let's do it by a data-driven decisions. And so that's the portion we're looking at, the performance to plan P2P.
Great. Lynn, I'm going to give you the last question before maybe I take one or two more questions from the audience and then wrap up. So talked somewhat about what NAVSUF is doing, WSS is doing for this transformation. What else? What else is NAVSUF doing to help accelerate what I will characterize as our ability to repair our way to victory?
So we are currently modeled for a just-in-time support system. So everything is set up with the most complex, longest supply chain imaginable, because we want it just in time, because over the years, people have determined that that's most efficient, most economic. Problem is that doesn't work in wartime. You have to have it there when you need it, which requires a short and agile time frame. So as we transform, we are putting pressure on ourselves to figure out what our shelf health is, what I will call it at the wholesale level, really needs to be to support all the fleet requirements, which is going to require us using all this data, perhaps artificial intelligence, machine learning, to help us predict where we're going to need a part, how should we be stocking it, where should we be stocking it to achieve the best response possible. We have to transform how we do contracts. So that's going to involve another digital type change, because we have ancient contract writing systems that are very labor intensive and burdensome. So we're going to have to figure out how to be more agile in identifying, especially for submarines where you get into level 1 sub-safe type material and contracts with very specific requirements. How do we get into longer term contracts with more demand and predictability with vendors to make sure that we can have this agile supply chain? All of that's going to be the future evolution of how we move into digital, how we come up with new analytics techniques using this artificial intelligence, and how we actually employ machine learning to do some of the more repetitive supply chain requirements.
Excellent. Do you have a question, sir?
I did. You said you got
Yep, room for one question.
Greg Jost, Insight Technology Solutions, probably for Tom. We know, of course, there's, 3,000 days of maintenance delay right now, 1,000 workers short in the public shipyards. How do you transform the work when the workload is so high and the people are so strained?
Yeah, well, latest update, everything's on time, we got all the people. But, so how do you do it? I would have to say that, see, it doesn't want me to answer, does it? Yeah, people believe that we're short, but are we short people? You know, are we using them effectively? Do we have them truly turning the wrenches the time that they need to be turning the wrenches, or are they sit and stand still because they don't have the support and the help when needed? That kind of gets back to the Toyota production system. You know, are we empowering the people and getting them the right tools and skill sets to do the work that they need to do? So that was the people portion, and the other, okay, so days of maintenance delay. Well, that's going to feed into the success of you getting the ship out on time or not. But it's not the only factor, because it's a complex system. You know, again, we do not understand, and I'm talking generally, the true material health of those ships when they come in for us to plan it, to execute it properly. Because growth work is that variation that is the biggest variation that's eating our lunch during the execution. So going back to the question from ChatGTP or GPT chat, is can we figure out a way to understand the material health of that ship so we can plan it properly during that 2 years of planning to go execute and be on time?
Yeah. Great question. So I think you understand that this panel is working transformations and working the items in the repair, both in aviation and maritime, that if conflict was to come, they're going to be able to get every pointy-nose aircraft, every submarine, every ship that's needed for the fight. I'm going to give the panel a chance, a very quick chance to close with that quick soundbite. What do you want the audience to take away? And Mike, I'm going to go to you first, and then Paul, and up towards me. So Mike, quick soundbite. What do you want to take away?
Sure. The business case for all these transformations. Right now, we're probably focused on money over speed, scrutinizing margin over innovation. We're focused on the median instead of the edges. Flip it. We're going to flip it when the war starts. We will. We'll just stop doing what we're doing, and we'll change everything. Do it. Because we don't have the capacity. Everybody knows it. Watch 60 Minutes, read the news. All these things are broken, right, that aren't working right. Flip it. You own the opportunity to flip it internally here. That's not easy. Again, you've got to take a lawyer, contracts manager, with an admiral, sit down with the CEO, sit down with the deck, sit down with certification, sit down with your congressman and say, we need to extend the buy rates for these things to 5 years. Whatever that thing is, whatever is your particular 5-year issue, we need to start thinking and identifying those and working them now. So we want to we focus our time on the business case for this and how it can work out for the government, for industry, and closing the gap, sitting at the table and working those numbers as what sort of drives us and is of most interest to us.
Paul?
Yeah, from industry standpoint, very highly motivated workforce, very patriotic, large number of members that are veterans. And so it's fertile soil to work together as a team to solve these issues. It really should be one team, each side listening to one another, figuring out ways to help one another. But the motivation and the patriotism, I can tell you, is that high.
Lynn?
I was going to say, my biggest lesson learned from this challenging but very rewarding journey that started first with the FRCs and now with the shipyards has been that the supply chain was often overlooked and not incorporated into the overall process. We're fixing that as we move forward. Committed leadership is what we need to continue to drive this change. It can't come from the bottom up. We have to push this change down, and that's what we're doing with the end-to-end supply chain management. So we're looking at it across the board. Leadership is supporting it and pushing where it needs to be pushed, escalating what needs to be escalated.
John?
So one of the key tenets to our transformation plan in the FRCs is the use of data and the transparent, authentic conversations. And I really believe that over the last year and a half, the conversations that we've had with our industry partners, with our other agency partners such as DLA and NAPSUP, we're really getting to the root of the issues that we have across the commands. And I think that's, to dependent mostly on just being able to have that the psychological safety, that trust, and being able to have those authentic conversations and letting the data show where those gaps are. And then the last thing I'd like to leave with is it is truly a partnership. So everybody in this room plays a vital role in the transformation, whether you're industry, whether you're government, whether you're within NAVAIR or outside of NAVAIR. So we're looking forward to continue the partnerships and transform the FRCs to better serve the Navy.
Tom?
Ditto. No. No, I really like everything that was just said, and one of the things I want to, what Paul said, we have shipyard employees that they're patriots. They're not coming to work to say, well, I'm just going to collect a paycheck and I'm going to see if I can sit in the corner. That's not what they want. They want to come in, they want to be valued, and they want to do the work that they're tasked to do. So we need to empower them. We need to give them the skills, the knowledge, the tools to do the work that they need to do. But also with what Lynn said is we got to have leadership at the top and enabling that to happen. They have to be supportive and breaking down barriers to help the mechanics and the workforce at the lowest levels to do the job that they need to do. So it really does both directions. Thanks.
Now, first, I would like to thank our panelists. I think you understand the complexity of all this. There's a data piece, there's a process piece, there's a technology piece, and you're looking at the leaders who are trying to move this needle in a great time of need. So I'd like to give a nice round of applause for our panelists.